joining us on the I Love CVille Show. It's great to connect with you through the I Love CVille Network on what is finally a day that does not have rain outside. I mean, I woke up this morning and, I'm a positive guy. Glass is half full every single day. I love to be the best version of myself every time I wake up. But this particular morning, after what seems like a Noah's Ark deluge, felt a little bit different. And there was a little bit more pep in my step. Today's program, I think, is going to embody that statement. We have two guys that our glass is half full with their mentality, with their coaching, with their parenting, and I think you're going to see that in today's interview. We'll welcome, in about 2 minutes, Alex Whitten, a friend of the program, and Nic Bell, who I can tell will be a friend of the program. He is new to the area, but he is a welcome addition to the Central Virginia community, Nic Bell. Alex is a guy that I think many in our viewing and listening audience know extremely well, and I think you're going to see Alex in his best state, where he's able to pontificate on a number of different topics, which is right up Alex Whitten's alley, which is why I like Alex Whitten. Today's program will give some props to Vacay Restaurant on West Main Street. They're a partner of the show. There's 50 parking spaces on site in the building. Vacay Restaurant, River Hawkins, and Johnny Ornalis. Our friends at Pro Renata love Pro Renata. I mean, I can take my wife and I, our two crazy boys, to a brewery in Crozet. They can play on the playground while I'm drinking IPAs and she's having IPAs and they're eating pizza and ice cream. I mean, it's just fantastic. Pro Renata and Crozet. And of course, our friends at Charlottesville Business Brokers. We help buyers and sellers of businesses in the Central Virginia community get across the finish line. Judah Wickhauer behind the camera. Take a look at the screen for today's headlines. First, an interview that I'm very excited to do. Judah, studio camera. And then let's welcome the fellas to the program, Alex Whitten and Nic Bell. Fellas, thank you kindly for joining us on the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. Alex, we will start with you. Introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners of our Fair Talk Show.
Yeah, thanks again for having us. Really excited about it. Alex Whitten moved to Charlottesville from Connecticut 12 years ago this November. Lovely wife Diana. I've got 3 little boys. Moved here originally to take over the head coaching position out at Western Albemarle High School. Spent 7 years there, and at the end of the 2019 season, it just became kind of too much with 3 littles at home and financial practice, and just kind of get pulled in too many different directions. So officially stepped away from that in 2019. Still have been involved in lacrosse, created a few different youth programs post-COVID when the world kind of went downhill. And then that has blossomed over the last 2-3 years with a spring league and some other developments, training products and programs. And then that ultimately led to Nic coming down a year ago from Connecticut to take over his position at Stab. And then we've kind of connected and built something that we're going to talk about hopefully today.
I'm excited for that. Nic, the show is yours. Introduce yourself to the folks that are watching.
Thanks, Jerry. I actually forgot to mention this when we talked pre-show, but my first job was actually at Blue Ridge School.
Oh, nice.
In Greene County. Loved it there.
St. George.
St. George, correct.
Yeah. I know Blue Ridge well.
Yeah, so the director of admission at the time, Trip Darren, who's now the head of school, was the person that hired me, and we've certainly stayed in touch. It's been really good to reconnect with him since coming back. After 2 years at Blue Ridge, I took a job in New York at Trinity Pauling School, which is actually when I first met Alex, because one of his former players still goes down as one of my favorite kids that I've ever coached, in Jimmy Joe Granito. Was a New Canaan High School product, did his postgraduate year with us before going to Loyola to start his college career.
Big time player.
Legit player.
Yeah.
One of the best ball stoppers in the goal ever. James Joseph Granito, which was how he was often referred to when he got into a little bit of trouble here and there.
Yeah.
Okay. So 6 years at Trinity Pauling, and then I moved over to Taft School in Connecticut. My wife, Ann, and I made that move together. We started our family there and TP, and then last year moved down with our 3 daughters to take dual positions at St. Anne's Belfield. So I work in the college counseling office during the day. She works in upper school admissions, and she coaches field hockey in the fall. I coach boys lacrosse in the spring. I will say I wear a lot of different hats, but certainly, my comments are really reflective of an entire experience in lacrosse, not necessarily specific to St. Anne's Belfield.
Very, very fair, very fair. I appreciate that. So viewers and listeners, these guys know athletics inside and out. They know athletics from being big-time performers themselves, and they know athletics now as coaches and as molders of the next generations of athletes that are going to play collegiately, first at the high school level, middle school level, collegiately, and the professional level. I'll get out of your way, Alex, and you set the stage for the viewers and listeners. Cav Lax Elite Boys, the organization. Show is yours. Anywhere you want to go.
Yeah, Cav Lax originally started about a decade ago on the girls' side. It was founded by Carrington King and Henry Oakey, both two, Charlottesville legends in their own right. Carrington now is the head girls coach at Stab, but needed an outlet for his daughters. He's got 3 girls. So 10 years ago, he started Cav Lax with Henry, and that has morphed into nothing short of really just a powerhouse, not only in Virginia, but like nationally. If you look at on the girls' side, I think there's 5 state championships. There's Division I and II privates, and then there's 6A, 5A, and 4A and under. Well, Stab won it this year, Covenant won it this year, and Western Albemarle won it this year. So 3 out of the 5 state champions came out of Charlottesville. Not a huge metropolitan area like a Richmond or a Norfolk or, so let's say Northern Virginia. But they're obviously doing something right, and I think their program is based on a solid fundamental principles around coaching, teaching, and leading, and it's showing the results. The number of girls out of that program that are going to play at not only colleges but top level colleges is really nothing short of remarkable. It's awesome. It's awesome to see. And so when Nick moved here about a year ago, again, our previous relationship was, I wouldn't say too robust, but we started talking about, kind of looking at what I'm doing, look at what he's going to be able to bring to the table to Charlottesville, and does that, were our visions around lacrosse congruent with each other in a way to develop what we have here, which in my opinion has been, let's just say it's an underutilized sport in this area. We compete at the high school level for publics with soccer. I think Virginia is only one of 2 states where soccer is a high school sport in the spring. So you really compete for athletes in that regard. And locally, soccer is, especially youth soccer, is a well-oiled machine. Like, soccer and all those programs, they do a really, really good job of attracting young athletes and talent on boys and girls side. And they do a pretty good job of retaining them. So they're highly organized, and they've been able to really do, put together some really good programming. And so kids have generally gravitated towards that. I think for to the detriment of lacrosse. But I think what we're going to do with the Cav Lax program, as we kind of slip in behind the girls, and we just, we're a decade behind them. This is our first fall of doing something. So, like anything else, there's always a storming stage when you're starting stuff as you try to, normalize into, a performing element. But I think we're off to a really good start so far.
A lot of people watching the program. We'll give some props to Logan Wells, Calelo, Vanessa Parkhill in Earlysville, the fabulous Diana Whitten giving the heart emoji right now on the show. We got the TV station down the street watching. John Blair's watching on LinkedIn. Jenny Hu gave us the retweet. We got a local newspaper watching the program right now. See some coaches watching the show as we speak. Nick, you go straight into the pressure cooker as the head honcho at St. Anne's Belfield with the varsity program. And I know this is not about the school in any capacity here. This is about your perspective as a coach, as a dad, as a player, and what you want to do with the community. I've seen firsthand, man. I've been in this community 24 years. Came here as a first year at UVA. While working at UVA, found a job as a part-time writer in the sports department under Jerry Radcliffe, and immediately got on the prep beat and got to know the John Blairs of the world, or excuse me, the Doug Terrings of the world. Got to know the Joe Daughertys, the Francis Johnsons of the world, the Hunter Prices of the world. Got to know, the folks that were really behind the scenes, like driving athletics forward. And I know your program is one of the best of the best. What did you know of Charlottesville and Central Virginia before coming down here from an athletic standpoint first, and then from a lacrosse standpoint second?
Great, thanks. So I actually grew up in Fauquier County, and as I went to Highland School there, and we played against the Covenants and St. Anne's sort of growing up and coming through. And at the time, this is in like the early 2000s, we just were not a well-built program to compete with St. Anne's on a regular basis. We had great battles with Covenant and a lot of the teams that they had in the middle 2000s. But, I was just I grew up worshiping, Virginia lacrosse, driving down 29 with my family to see a lot of games here at Klockner. And, and then I went, graduated from Highland, I went and played at Brown, actually for Lars Tiffany, for 3 of the 4 years that I was there.
For those who don't know, now the head coach, the University of Virginia.
Correct.
Yeah,
the head coach at UVA. And coached in New England essentially for 12 years after my first 2 years at Blue Ridge, and actually I think at my last job at Taft School, I mean we had really built that program to be one of the best in the country, and I think there were definitely some people that had questions as to why sort of leave that when we did, me and my family, and if it wasn't for having a lot of appreciation for what St. Anne's Belfield lacrosse means in the state and certainly in this community. Again, as someone who just has been here and has an appreciation for that, it just meant something, different for me. And
you wouldn't have done it.
Would not have done it.
Yeah, especially with 3 young daughters.
Right, and that would, to be fair, I mean, that was certainly the leading kind of reason for our move. We just felt like Charlottesville was going to be a much better place to raise a family. We have 3 kids under 8 right now. 2 of those 3 are actually at St. Anne's. And my third will hopefully be next year, as long as she gets in. It has to do with my growing up in Virginia, knowing and appreciating this lacrosse here, and really wanting to take this on as a passion project and something that I see as a sleeping giant.
Vanessa Parkhill, again, watching her son, starting quarterback at one time at St. Anne's Belfield, a standout on the lacrosse field as well. He is just an outstanding, now a grown man right here, Vanessa Parkhill. Crazy to say. I remember when he was winning a Falcon Club award, and I was sitting at the table with her late husband, Gary, and her family to celebrate her son. I'd be remiss not to highlight, I said John Blair earlier, who's watching. John Blake, who's now at Fort Union Military Academy, was the football coach at St. Anne's. I'll throw this to you guys. Seems like such a hotbed, man. And I've made this comment in regards from sports and government. I don't understand why we're not emphasizing sports tourism more. I mean, we have the University of Virginia here. Why they're not more regional or national ODP big-time tournaments in the area across all sports. You see a little bit of that with soccer, with the soccer facility, but we got the University of Virginia in our backyard. You're talking about a perennial power in what used to be called the Sears Cup, which is a measure of athletic prowess across the department. As you guys know, we struggle, yes, in football, but if you look at the department across the board, it's one of the best. North Carolina, Stanford come to mind of success across the department. I don't see why we're not utilizing that more to drive big-time tournaments, tourism dollars here to the area. I'll throw this to you, Alex. The impact that UVA's national championship success, whether it's soccer, lacrosse, tennis, baseball, swimming, I mean, I could continue, golf. I mean, squash, a top 10 program, I'm a big squash player.
Right.
How does that impact the next generation of student or kid or athlete that wants to get into whatever sport they see on grounds?
So that's a great question. We had Connor Schellenberger at practice on Sunday, and for those that don't know him, he just graduated from UVA this past year, 4-time All-American.
The man walks on water.
I mean,
yeah.
He's really, really good.
Yeah.
And the comment that I made to the group of kids when he was doing a little shooting demo, as I was like, as good of a player as Connor is, he's a better kid. And I say kid, he's a young man, obviously. But he's a great person. And one of the things that I said to the guys, I asked Connor this. I said, hey, have any of your teammates ever complained about youth kids coming up and introducing themselves and saying hi to them? And he's like, absolutely not. I think one of the things that Charlottesville has a huge, it's a huge benefit is that you have access to UVA. And not only do you have access to it, but you have access to a great set of role models in the athletic department. And the accessibility of those people is huge. If you go to a game at Klockner, the kids play the game, then they go into the locker room under the stands, and then they walk back through the entire crowd back to their locker room. And they're always there signing autographs and high-fiving guys and taking pictures and stuff like that. So I think that that's a huge thing. If you want to see some of the best in athletics, you have an immediate access to all of it. You can go to those games, you can meet those kids, you can have even access to those coaches. So it's a huge thing.
I'll throw gentlemen to you. Questions are coming in. We got questions about the focus on head injuries coming in, the focus on kids. Are they playing sports as much? The screen time question, I knew that was going to come up, is coming up all over the feed over here. How about for Nick, with what you guys are doing, what is the next chapter or what's the next progression in the flip book? How do you guys take it to a level that could potentially, surpass, mimic what Vacay is doing? Because they seem to be, as of now, the gold standard when it comes to youth sports in the Central Virginia market.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's to answer that question. I mean, historically, there was a point in time that I can vividly remember where lacrosse in Charlottesville was actually even stronger than it was in Northern Virginia. And that was not terribly long ago. We're talking late 90s, early 2000s through the late 2000s.
I remember a time, I've been here 24 years covering sports in this community for 21 of those 24 years. I remember a time where lacrosse was more impactful, more engagement, more influential than soccer right here.
Correct.
I remember a time when, I forget the name of the tournament, when...
Dogwood.
Yeah,
Dogwood.
The private and public schools were routinely playing each other early in the season. And dude, that captivated spring sports.
Yes.
And that tournament folded, which was unfortunate.
Yes. Yeah, so, and so like that is fresh in our mind as we're starting this. I would say, in speaking for sort of leadership at Cav Lax and sort of what Alex and I have talked about, there are some sports organizations that try to monopolize the market and, spread tentacles all over the place. And I think with what we're thinking about doing with our program is we want it to be a situation where every single boy in it feels known, where we actually know their names and can personally invest in them. I don't think that we have any interest in having tiered developmental model all the way down. If it gets really big and we have the infrastructure to support that growth, we'll explore it. But what's really important for us is that we're just doing a good job with the kids that we have. And in this first year, we started doing some winter clinics last January. We continued playing with a group of kids over the summer, not really knowing as a new program what this would look like in our first year. We sort of launched our tryout and have run these club teams starting this fall. And we have just under 170 kids playing out of nothing.
That's awesome.
And we feel like we're right now with the coaches that we have, sort of the space, and fields and access to tournaments and things like that, we feel like we're in a really healthy place. And, we get emails all the time for people that want to join or hop in or coming from other areas like Harrisonburg or Lynchburg or the Valley. But we're being careful not to get too big too fast. Again, the experience of each boy and the families in the program is what matters the most to us. And so if that becomes something that resembles soccer, great. Or if it just becomes, 6, 8, 10 teams in K through 12, whatever it is, then we're fine with that too.
Vanessa highlights her son Lee, and they won the state championship at your program, St. Anne's, in 2015. There's no pressure over there, Bill. We also, multiple people saying the Dogwood tournament, the Nolan Jenkins Memorial Tournament, that is a blast from the past. I was working as a sports writer when Nolan passed away in a car accident. The son of Anita Jenkins, the girls' basketball coach at Albemarle High School. I remember this vividly, having to speak to Coach Jenkins, a friend of the program, about this turn of events. And I still get emotional about that happening. Thank you for that history there for the viewers and listeners. Multiple people are asking what age should they get involved, including one mom, Lauren, who's saying 6 and 7-year-old, how can they get involved? A lot of people asking about the challenge with lacrosse. It's the financial barrier of entry, which we'll talk about with you. I just want a basic question. I'll throw it as a topic of conversation. You guys go anywhere you want. Are kids playing sports to the same clip? We're relatively the same age, the three of us here, as we did growing up. My parents said, dude, you're not inside. You get 30 minutes of TV maybe a day. We're going to supervise what you're watching on TV. You better be outside. You can play soccer. You can play golf. You can play football, basketball, tennis, but you're not going to be inside. Go out and play. Are kids still doing that to the same clip as we did growing up?
No, they're not. I'll speak for my kids. They're not doing it the way that we were doing it. And again, I have to always kind of remind myself that today is very different than 1985 when I was my kid back in the day, right? You had to get off the couch to change the channel on the television, right? So, and I think we had like 3 or 4 channels until we had cable. So, it's just a very different world. And Nick and I were actually on the way over here, and we were talking about it. I heard a podcast with a guy, John Eldridge, who's a Christian writer for men, and he said something. The big challenge for today's parents is that you have to make your kid's life more interesting than YouTube, and the screens are designed to keep people's eyes affixed to them. I mean, I'm guilty of picking up my phone way too often, and I think for young people, it becomes a huge challenge. As far as the comment around the expense of getting into lacrosse, like one of the big barriers of entrance is the cost of equipment. I would say though that if you're interested in having your son or daughter play, there are ways of not having to shell out $700-800 for all of the gear. We've got a lot. I mean, I think I gave probably like 20 items to the program and just gave gloves out to stuff that my kids have outgrown. Played Against Sports up 29. Local business has got a lot of used equipment. It's kind of hit or miss sometimes when you go in there, but like they're really good at putting good stuff on people that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. I also don't think that you necessarily need to go drop, you don't have to break the wallet open too much to buy all of the brand new stuff for a younger player who's just trying it. A lot of times people have stuff that you can borrow. Like for our program, we have a whole bin of stuff. Like if you want to come in and try it for a couple of days, don't make the investment in it. Just borrow it, see if it works. And then if it does, we go from there. Brian Wilberger at UVA has helped tremendously with using some of the older stuff that, UVA has not yet recycled. They bring stuff out and, kids are just borrowing stuff all summer. They were borrowing stuff. So, it is a challenge, but, kids, if the worst thing that kids do is turn the TV off and go outside and dig a hole in the ground.
That's a success.
It's fantastic. Go get dirty, Go skin up your knees and fall off your bike. You'll figure it out.
How many kids do you have?
3.
He has 3. You have 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2 sons. So together we have 8 kids here on set. Fathers of 8 kids on set. The worst is hyperbole here. One of the things that frustrates me the most in life is watching our 6-year-old doom scrolling on YouTube, paralyzed on the couch on YouTube. And I am convinced, I had this conversation with my wife maybe once a week, I'm convinced that we will look back 20 to 25 years from now after this generation is older and impacted by this, and we're going to be like, how did we allow our kids to spend hours mindlessly surfing content on the internet that we had no idea what they were watching when we saw in real time how they were paralyzed? I could be next to our 6-year-old, loves Skittles, as close to him as I am to you, Nick, saying, I got a bag of Skittles here. You want a bag of Skittles here? I got a bag of Skittles for you. And he's so focused on what's on his screen, does not even hear what I'm saying. I mean, it's like, I sincerely think it's like the 2024 version of digital drugs for our children. Screen time in sports and anywhere you want to go on this topic.
Well, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse for something that I think is like, very much at the forefront of so many different families' minds. But I would say, like, relative to our club and coaching style and philosophy, we were talking about it before the show, in a town that does not have ice hockey, this is the next best thing. And it really is, even if your kid is a good athlete, has never played before, is remotely interested. I mean, we really believe in designing our training sessions in such a way that's extremely engaging, high touch. We really don't have a lot of patience for long lines and kids standing around. It is a fast-paced, action running-based sport. And within that, there is still so much opportunity for kids to get involved who are not necessarily the biggest or the fastest or the strongest at this stage. You can develop a lot. That stick can neutralize an enormous amount of athleticism and athletic instinct. So we really think it's a sport for anybody. We built out our pricing to be as accessible and in line with other youth sport opportunities in Charlottesville and Central Virginia. And honestly, we're seeing more kids coming into the program and staying than we are seeing going out.
I'll add to the YouTube piece or the screen piece. YouTube and iPads, iPhones, all
you
that
took
stuff.
your boys' iPads away.
I did.
Yeah, I remember you
Much
saying
to their
that to me.
chagrin. Yeah, they've been in my office since February.
Yeah,
but
hear that, sweetheart? Okay. She's watching. My wife's watching.
Is that YouTube actually can be a tool. Like, I just turned 50. So when I was a kid, you had very little access to material about lacrosse sports in general. But if you're a new player, you can go on YouTube and type in ground ball drills or passing skills, shooting drills. You can go find a ton of content that's on there now. I remember when I was a kid, the Final Four would be aired on, I think, ESPN2, and then the finals were abbreviated down to an hour. On Memorial Day. So now you've got ESPN does a tremendous job of putting games, men's and women's games on TV. ESPN Plus shows, like hundreds and hundreds of games. The Pro League is on the big leagues as well. So you do have a ton of access now to actually informative content that can actually help you as either a coach or a player or a parent to try to understand a few things about the game that you might not know.
You guys I almost see you guys in some ways as carrying on the legacy or the torch of some of the godfathers before you. Ginny, who on Twitter highlights Al Sadler, David Sloan, Myron Ripley. Saw David Sloan literally getting his eyes checked at University Eye Care right next to us here in the Macklin building. David Sloan, a friend of the program. Again, I'll highlight Doug Terring, Tommy Brannick. Comes to mind. Been here 24 years and had an opportunity to get to know some Carrington. I love the content Carrington's posted on social media where he's training players. Of course, of the King family, entourage, if you may. Any pressure or your thoughts on just carrying on the torch or the legacy of a sport that is so rich in tradition? And I would even say this, and multiple people have put this on the feed here. And I'll be very to the point on this one. There was a time, and I've been here 24 years, where lacrosse had a lot more options from a participation standpoint. Seminole, was it Calac?
Calic. Yep.
Yeah, Calic. ACAC was doing stuff. I think the Y was doing stuff at one time. I almost saw not a fizzle, but was it an engagement drop? Do you think that's fair? And you guys are trying to maybe in some ways revitalize, which is, I'll stop talking here. It's shocking to me that it saw an engagement drop because of Julie's, Coach Myers at UVA, Coach Starja, because of Lars and what they're doing. They are perennial powers, and that still happened. Anywhere you want to go on this?
I would say, to be fairly direct, I mean, lacrosse is a sport in any major market where there are generally pretty well-educated and affluent people getting into it or starting it. And there's certainly money to be made in the sport, and I think in a lot of, like where I was coming from in Connecticut, we experienced something kind of similar in that there were a lot of competing entities at the youth and even the high school and club levels that were pulling kids and families in multiple different directions. And I think, what we are trying to accomplish with this is for it to be a unifying force within the sport in this area. And, I think, even when I was interviewing and looking to move down here, I was sort of like, what is what? Like, where do kids play? What are the clubs that they...
What's the brand?
Right, what is the brand?
Yeah.
It was kind of like, everyone's like, oh, like Alex does a great job, and they're Seminole, and they do this, and there used to be this, there used to be that, and everyone sort of says the same thing. And I think for a community that is relatively small in terms of population, there was and is a real need to try and consolidate a lot of the lacrosse efforts in town. It feels like every single day I bump into somebody at the grocery store who's like, oh yeah, I played at Duke, in the mid 80s, and, I really want my son or my grandson or whatever to get into this, and we just don't know where to go. Like, that keeps coming up. And so, we want to be inclusive of all groups in town. We want to loop in people that are new to the area, people that have been here for a longer period of time, and try and just consolidate what we're doing to try and make the best experience we can for the boys in this town.
Yeah, I think also when you look at youth athletics, right, unless it's, even our program, Nick and I are kind of the driving engine behind most of it, and we've got a great group of guys that are all helping out on the coaching level, but it's a couple of figureheads, in this case, two of us, really to try to drive it. And it takes a village, right? We've got tons of support from a lot of different people. But if you look at youth programming, or you're trying to get something off the ground, 95% of the heavy lifting is done by 5% of the people. And so if you don't have boots on the ground and people really putting time and effort in, it's really hard to get it off. Like when we moved here in 2012, we created the Western Albemarle Lacrosse Club, which is a 501c3 status nonprofit. That entity is still in place. Mario Washington, who's a Western Albemarle grad, went to Hampton-Sydney. He was my assistant for 6 years. He's a dear friend of mine. He was elevated to the head coaching position once I stepped down in 19. He's done a tremendous job. He's gone to the state semis, several times. Obviously with COVID in there for a couple of years, got a little jammed up. But that 501c3 was run by a small group of people. Mike Riley, Tony Corbett. We had just like a very small group of people that really, did a ton of lifting in terms of organization and logistics to get that thing going. And I feel like that has kind of stepped away. Per Nick's comment about what Cav Lax Elite is trying to do on the boys' side is, tremendous growth is a great thing. It's kind of a good problem to have, but it's still a problem. And one of the things with lacrosse is that you need infrastructure. And infrastructure in lacrosse really is fields, coaching, referees, and equipment. And so, around Charlottesville, you're somewhat limited for fields. I know, like in Richmond, there's a giant, turf complex with 9, 10 fields, which is a huge asset to the community. We don't have anything like that here. In fact, all the public schools all have one turf field. Stab has got 2. So you're somewhat limited from the growth perspective. And, again, as local programs look to build, there's really no top-down methodology in many of the high schools around here, from the high school all the way down to K, right? So that's really what we did at the Western Albemarle Club. Was I basically governed 12 all the way down to kindergarten and directed that. And, the kids that just graduated, like the Chris Baglios and the Quinn Rileys, those kids started when I was my first year, when they were kindergartners. And then now they've graduated and moved on, and they went to the state semis last year and saw some pretty good success. So, so it takes a village, right? And so a lot of these programs where you see, Albemarle historically has been very, very good. Charlottesville was historically really good.
Yeah.
And some of those programs have dropped off, but, again, that is really more of an infrastructure thing, and you've got to get coaches in place. You've got to get support pieces in place. There's a financial element to this where you need support, you need equipment, and you need some expertise in doing it. And literally, the guys that we have working for us or helping us, they're guys that have been involved in lacrosse. They've gotten a lot from lacrosse. I say this all the time. Besides meeting my wonderful wife, like every opportunity in my life has been presented to me because I played this sport.
He mentions the AlbCo program, one time skippered by Pat McAdams, friend of the program, played at Washington and Lee. I believe he was a midfielder, standout.
Lynchburg, I think.
Was it Lynchburg or WNL?
I think it was Lynchburg.
Okay, Lynchburg. Okay, I stand corrected. Okay. Pat's going to kill me for that. Mike, also a good friend of mine, who was an assistant coach under his brother, Pat, right there. You mentioned the system. That's one of the things, and it's not the same sport, but football. Louisa County and the late, great football coach Mark Fisher ran a single wing attack, and he, along with the athletic director Doug Straley, who's now the superintendent of schools, put that system into place, not just at the JV level, not just at middle school football, but the Pop Warner teams in
Huge.
Louisa were running the same offense that Fisher did on the varsity level, and it was no surprise that Louisa routinely does not just contend for Jefferson District championships, but regional and state championships, because by the time the athletes get to Coach Fisher, he's now passed, but the varsity program, they know the system inside and out. This question is all over the feed, and you've touched on it briefly. Lacrosse, a sport of affluent, and how do we break that barrier where, like a basketball sport like basketball is, you need a ball and there's courts everywhere in the community to play, like a pickup game. That topic to you guys.
I mean, we ultimately what we would love to see with this is more kids playing, more kids being coached at a higher level, more kids enjoying sort of the team dynamic and like the life lessons that come from participating in team athletics. And ultimately, we would love to see Western Albemarle be really strong, Albemarle get a shot in the arm, St. Anne's and Covenant, all the schools in our area, we really want to see be successful as a result of this.
I just got the DM. It's totally Lynchburg. I just got chastised. It is Lynchburg right there. So Alex Whitten was completely right about that. We'll throw this to you. Where's the fields? This is on the feed. Where's the field space going to come from for what you guys are doing?
So right now, all of our field space is at St. Anne's Bellfield. And really, having the two turfs that we do side by side on the lower school campus has just made it easier to consolidate a lot of our coaching resources. We will use some of the upper school, the upper school grass on Ivy Road for like a play day or two that we'll do this fall. But most everything has been, every single training we've done and every single practice has been on adjacent turf fields.
Yeah, I think too, we've been pretty good at maximizing those resources, right? So turf fields in town are a limited resource. So if you've got,
Monticello has one.
Monticello, Western, Charlottesville, Albemarle, they've all got one.
Yeah.
But
access is the issue, isn't it?
Well, access is the issue because typically you have to go through the county. If you have a relationship with a head coach like Mario Washington's been hugely helpful. Like last spring, he got us access to one of the grass fields behind Western for some youth development because he's a guy that sees that if he's involved in the younger levels, then those kids come through, right? Yeah. But what we have been really successful is, we put 60, 70, 80 kids on a field, and we're doing kind of small developmental programming drills with 8 to 10 kids in each drill. So we're not taking like a field with 20 kids and we don't have that many sets of feet on the field. We have a tremendous number of kids on one field, just maximizing that resource the best we can.
I love that. How about this from, first let me get to Ginny on Twitter. She says, my husband played, coached, and ref lacrosse for decades. He finally had to hang up his stripes this past spring because too many years as a goalie was bad for his knees. Her kids grew up with local greats like Sadler, Sloan, Myron Ripley, and the UVA players stuck their pantries with their kids, and she stocked the pantries of the UVA players with her kids' favorite snacks. Lacrosse truly makes you feel like a family. She said from an insider's perspective, parents pushing more and more travel lax is what hurt many local options here in the Central Virginia market. Another mom on the feed puts this, some of the athletes did not make the teams when they went out for them, so they went and created other programs or other playing opportunities which splintered the efforts around here. So that's an interesting dynamic. This from LinkedIn, from John. With a son who plays football, there's heightened awareness for head injuries in all sports. Do your guests have any thoughts on head injuries in lax and advice to parents who might be worried about potential head injuries? It's a great question.
It's a huge question. I played high school football, and I had too many concussions to count.
Whitten's good to go. Whitten's good to go.
Yeah. So that might answer a few questions for people out there. But there's actually been obviously a huge focus on head injuries with baseline concussion testing before kids even start a season. We're super aware of, and most coaches who are worth their salt are going to be very attuned to if a kid does have contact. Lacrosse is a collision sport. I think the national presence of U.S. Lacrosse has done a really good job of reducing the amount of large collisions in the sport. They've taken that part of the game away. When I played back in the day, you could cut somebody in half and it wouldn't be a violation. But today there's a real conscious effort on that. The number one, some of the helmet technology that's been put forth with Warrior, Cascade, and STX.
Vastly improved.
Yeah. And one of the big things with head injuries is when kids kind of turn to the side. Like I always say this, a lacrosse or football helmet can take an impact to the front from a car, and it won't impact you that much. But if you turn your head to the side, that's where you get some compression. Today's day and age, when you play on turf, a lot of those turf fields have like those rubber pellets in the back, and I'm sure parents out there have had kids come home with black rubber pellets in their shoes, especially on rainy days, and they litter all through the house. But what happens is a lot of times kids will fall backwards, and then when their head hits that turf, bang, it like kind of pops off, and it's almost like whiplash. So there's a lot of new technology in the helmets now today on the back side of the helmet to try to mitigate that as much as possible. Unfortunately, anytime you've got a collision sport, hockey, football, lacrosse, you're going to have elements of head contact. But I think the referee focus and the overall rules focus on eliminating that part of the game as much as possible has taken huge strides in the last, let's say 10 years.
Does the organization have a chance to get like a true home base of its own? I mean, is that a goal? I mean, obviously that's going to cost a boatload of money here. And then multiple people are asking how do they get involved from a fundraising or support standpoint. But just curious of a spot for you guys.
Well, I think Alex alluded to it earlier. We're hoping that people listening have really deep pockets and can help us build a mega turf facility.
Yes, why not?
That is
It's only $20 million, Jerry. Right?
Program's doing well. Is that much for a turf field?
Well, not for a turf field, but like the one in Richmond.
Gotcha.
Typically, the way a turf field it's about 1.3, 1.4 million bucks for one.
Yeah,
if you buy two, it's greatly reduced because all their gear and equipment is already there.
Is Dart and Tau an option?
Dart and Tau would potentially be an option.
But those are grass, aren't they?
And you're going to not be able to get on them for a week now with 10 days of straight rain. So, you're somewhat limited. My oldest is over at Covenant. Covenant's two fields. I mean, you drive by them, and they look like they're carpeted. I mean, they're amazing.
They are amazing.
But when it rains a lot, they get wet, and unfortunately, they kind of go offline. I think now this is maybe almost putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
I think, again, good problem to have, but maybe still a problem. I think we would have to leverage some relationships around town so that we're not necessarily coming in and trying to outlay a ton of money to try to create a lacrosse program. I know that there's the Alliance program up 29 on Polo Grounds North. I think they have extended some offers to host some lacrosse stuff. They've got grass fields. Yeah. But I think ultimately that would be, that would be ideal if you could find even just two fields. But again, it's a matter of resources to get them in, zoning to get them in, timing, and all that kind of stuff as well.
I would also say for people that have experience running lacrosse-specific clubs, the primary way to bring in revenue for the club is in the event space. So by hosting tournaments where we could potentially have 8, 10, 12, 20, 30 teams playing, on 8 to 10 to 15 fields.
Because that's what soccer's doing right now.
Right. And so that is something that is not, I would not say it's like something that we're terribly focused on right now in this sort of like growth phase. Yeah. But we've certainly kicked it around already of like, what would it look like to get a bunch of teams from all around the state, coming here and playing lacrosse. That's great. We just, you really need parking, vendors,
Facilities.
major facilities,
Yeah.
and fields.
So, a couple other questions here before we wind down. And we went long with this one because I think this interview is valuable and fantastic, and you guys are great. One mom's asking, is it too early for a 6 to 7-year-old to get involved with what you're doing? And should or how can I get our son involved?
So that question has come through a lot. If you go to the Cav Lax Boys Instagram page, there's a link in the bio there for just general program information that we sort of put out there, and people will fill it out where we can talk to them about what we're doing season by season. Right now we're in our fall club program. We're running a K2 developmental program at the same time. In the winter, we're soon going to roll out our plans for that. We have a few different options that people can kind of roll into. We're going to build off of a lot of momentum that I think Alex and others in town have established for a spring league, and then continue our club playing in the summer, traveling, playing in tournaments, and doing a lot of coaching and development. So really, this will evolve into something that is, by the end of this calendar year, a 4-season, fully operational lacrosse club where we can take in beginners, and it's also a place where we have the numbers right now. We can actually challenge our higher level players by separating our teams into experienced and developmental. That's been really invaluable for us. But it would be, go to social media, Instagram, click the link in the bio. That's the best way right now.
What do you say to the question, and we knew it was going to come up, the sports specializing, playing one sport year round? When do you do it? Should you do it? What's the age? Or, you guys played lacrosse at very high levels. Are you of the mindset play a different sport every season?
I would say, as someone who's currently a high school coach, I am seeing an increasing number of overuse injuries that come from the repetition of certain athletic movements, and some of those come from lacrosse and other things. I generally think it's a bad thing for athletes to specialize. Honestly, I think about some of our guys at St. Anne's. A third of our varsity football roster are varsity lacrosse kids, and I think that's the best thing for them. And so we're structuring and we're laying out our program in such a way where kids can, and we want to, and encourage them to do other things. There will get to be a point in the high school years, depending on what your aspirations are in the sport in terms of recruiting, when you may have to lean more into lacrosse than other things. But we don't think that it's healthy for young athletes to just do one thing in lower school, middle school, and the early high school years.
Specialization, I totally against it, especially at the younger age. Ultimately, when you look at kids, like let's say 6 to 12, right? You want them to have a good experience. You want them to have fun, right? So if they're not out there exploring different things, learning different physical attributes, if you're a swimmer, you're going to have better conditioning than you are if you're sitting around. Right, so you're also learning from different coaches, different techniques, different things around different skills. So specialization, in my opinion, you should be able to do a million different things. I always say 15 minutes a day, 365 days a year is 91.25 hours. So if you look at 2 hours as the length of a varsity lacrosse program practice, you're getting 46 full practice days by spending 15 minutes a day. So you can go play football, you can go play soccer, you can go play wrestling, and you can find 15 minutes a day, which is 1% of your day, to work on some skill set. It gives you almost 92 hours a year in skill development.
This interview, fantastic. I knew it was going to be good. Exceeded my expectations, and I can tell the viewers and listeners responded favorably. We'll close with how you get involved, how viewers and listeners can support you, how they can get their kids in the mix.
I would just reach out, give us a shout. You're going to hear it from either Nick or myself, and the more the merrier. This is something that we see as being a community program. And Nick alluded to it a little bit earlier. There's people from Harrisonburg and Lexington that are coming up. But we want to try to bring in as many great people, bring in as many great kids, and work to develop those kids, not only as athletes, but as young men. So, if you have an interest, your son has an interest, or you just want some more information, just reach out to us.
I love it. I love it. Nick Bell, guys, Alex Whitten on the program today. Thank you, fellas.
Appreciate it.
Certainly appreciate it, guys. We spent 50 minutes with the coaches. We were going to do 20 to 25, but the interview was just fantastic. I think it's a playbook for a lot of parents out there on what to do and what not to do. A couple items out of the notebook, and thank you, fellas. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Nick. You guys have a good one. Items out of the notebook that we also wanted to cover today. First, programming notes. Tomorrow, the president of the Jefferson Council will be on the show. The Jefferson Council, in a lot of ways, looking to shift the narrative at the University of Virginia as it applies to the single sanction honor code. The Jefferson Council would like that to return to prominence. The Jefferson Council looking to hold President Jim Ryan and the administration accountable as it applies to freedom of speech, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and potentially a bloated payroll with Ryan, his lieutenants, and administrators. The Jefferson Council putting things in a spotlight from the saga that's at the UVA health system with the University Physicians Group and 128 physicians signing a letter of no confidence and kind of putting in the spotlight that medical charts are being changed to maintain performance standards, that fraudulent billing is happening. The Jefferson Council is driving that narrative. They leaked the audio as it applied to the UVA investigator, the administrator, that interrogated a ROTC student, a student in ROTC, and said, look, should this be, this type of investigation, interrogation being done with a kid that doesn't have his parents present or an attorney present? That was on yesterday's show if you missed it. So if you want to see what I think is going to be just a fantastic interview, mark your calendar for 12:30 tomorrow as Thomas Neal will join us from Baltimore, Maryland on the I Love CVille Show. One other programming note, next week, the I Love CVille Network off air. We're on vacation with our families. Judah's going to be hobnobbing with pillars in the Outer Banks, stakeholders, and is it Nags Head where you're going? Duck, where you're going?
I'm not sure this year.
The man is so busy and so popular that he's not even sure where he's going on vacation on Saturday. My family and I, are going to be spending time traveling as well. So we're looking for some R&R. We do return back on air, the I Love CVille Network, after being off next week on Monday the 21st with regular scheduled programming. We'll weave Judah in on a two-shot. There's three pieces of news that we want to get to. First, this one from the food and beverage category. Fuzzy's Taco Shop in 5th Street Station is closed. Mm-hmm. I've had intimate knowledge of this for about a month and change now. The business has been it's been for sale on the DL and the hush hush, but we are business brokers at Charlottesville Business Brokers, and a buyer, difficulty finding a buyer for this particular restaurant. Overhead is pretty significant with the space of that size. In a Class A shopping center like 5th Street Station, Fuzzy's Taco Shop has decided to close down permanently. This will leave a significant vacancy in 5th Street Station. It was one of the most prominent locations in 5th Street Station. You think there's Wegmans, there's the Dick's Sporting Goods store and its outdoor component. There's the furniture store, Havarti's, as you fix that center screen for us. Havarti's down the road. You got the movie theater over there. You got Timberwood Tap House, and then you're probably looking at Fuzzy's Taco right there. So one of the top 7 or 8 most prominent rental opportunities in 5th Street Station is now an empty storefront. Fuzzy's Taco Shop, the chain from Texas, no more. Second piece of news that I want to get out there, Judah, as you're also rotating lower thirds on screen, is the Artful Lodger livery stable building. If you know the downtown mall, the building right next to the Omni Hotel, home to the Artful Lodger, the livery stable, and a couple of other shops, has been sold. The owner, Jeffrey Levin, who developed the apartment complex where the ABC store and Blue Moon Diner are, he developed that just a short while ago. He also was the owner of this building at 218 West Market Street. and he purchased it, as Sean Tubbs has reported, in June of 2020 for $4 million. He sold it in September for $5,750,000. He initially was going to do apartments at the location of the Artful Lodger, Livery Stable, and the other shops at 218 West Market Street. And he pivoted from apartments to a hotel. And the reason he pivoted, he straight up says this in Tubbs' reporting, quote, "I just could not make the economics work for residential under the new zoning code," end quote. This is a dagger in the efforts of housing activists, of livable Charlottesville, of Planning Commissioner Rory Stolzenberg, who pushed the new zoning ordinance, in some ways rammed the new zoning ordinance into the throats of Charlottesvillians and taxpayers. Here you have a developer who developed an apartment, a luxury apartment building on West Main Street, where Blue Moon Diner is.
Yeah.
The ABC store is. The guy owns the University Tire building next to this apartment tower, which has not been developed on West Main Street. He wanted to build apartments in density on the downtown mall. Spent many years going in front of city council looking for approval to build these apartments on the site of the Artful Lodger, Livery Stable, and the other shops there. And finally, he threw in the towel and said, the new zoning ordinance does not make this pencil out. The economics do not work.
He even went above and beyond.
Went above and put in perspective.
Well, so he was going to have, he agreed to build a minimum of 8 affordable units on-site or off-site, with 2 more units to be reserved for households making less than 50% above. That was above the minimum requirement that he would have to do to build these, based on the council agreement. And unfortunately, it was not enough to satisfy, as the article states, wasn't enough to satisfy the concerns of City Councilor Michael Payne.
So he pivots to hotel, decides to exit the hotel piece, the hotel development on his own, sells the building for $5,750,000. Remember, he bought it in June of 2020 from $4 million. He purchased it from a good friend of the program and a hell of a foosball player, a guy I've spent many hours across from a foosball table at the Lazy Parrot Grill, drinking beers and having a good time and getting into mischief. And now the new buyer is an entity based out of Glen Allen, Virginia. They plan to pursue a hotel at that location in the shadows of the Omni Hotel. And they're jettisoning an opportunity to build housing and density and apartments because of the stringent nature of the new zoning ordinance. Ladies and gentlemen, a dagger in the efforts of housing activists in the Charlottesville community. You want to add something to that?
I was going to say the dagger kind of came from them, didn't it?
He straight up, it's no coincidence that Sean chooses to use the only quote from the guy. I just could not make the economics work for residential under the new zoning code. The only quote from Jeffrey Levin, the developer, he uses is that one.
Yeah. And like I said, he also pointed out the fact that this guy was going to go above and beyond, but it wasn't enough for city council. And then, Sean Tubbs always does a great job reporting, and he goes on to talk about some of the other projects that could have been started, and some of them haven't.
Yeah, and remember yesterday we discussed on the program that in Arlington County, Virginia, they just revamped new zoning ordinance was demoralized by a judge.
Yeah.
Who found that the lead up to that zoning ordinance did not truly outline the impacts it would have on folks that had single-family detached homes.
And this is one of the effects, as I was talking about Sean Tubbs' reporting, and he talks about some of the very few projects that have come about under the new zoning, and one of them is a house getting raised to build a structure with 9 units. If they built 10 units, then one of them would have to be affordable.
Right. If you hit 10 units or more under the new zoning ordinance, then 10% of the project has to be tied to AMI for 99 years. An absurdity, if you think about it. All right, last item out of the news notebook today. This is a piece of breaking news for you. You will hear about this in legacy media. You will hear about it from us first. Afton Scientific, a biopharmaceutical company in Albemarle County, announced today that they're going to invest $200 million and create 200 new jobs at their facility right over the Charlottesville city line on Avon Extended. Afton Scientific, biotechnology, biopharmaceutical. I've said on this program for years that 8,000 to 10,000 new jobs will be coming online very soon. I highlighted the $11 billion investment by Amazon in Louisa County. I highlighted the Paul Manning Biotech Institute on Fontaine. Paul Manning funding it to the tune of $125 million. I highlighted Jeffrey Woodruff's data science school, the new data science school, and the businesses that would spring or birth from the data science school to capture the talent matriculating from said school. I highlighted Northrop Grumman, its $250 million facility in Waynesboro, $94,000 the average wage for those working at that $250 million facility in Waynesboro. 8,000 to 10,000 new jobs in short time coming to the area, and the impact it would have on housing in Charlottesville and Albemarle County in particular. Driving in value. Where are 8,000 to 10,000 people? And all the folks associated with these new jobs coming to the area said most of the hires will come from out of market. Most of them will come from out of market.
Yeah.
I have a genuine question for you. Where are 8,000 to 10,000 new citizens who come to Charlottesville and Albemarle County within the next 5 to 6 years? Where are they going to live from a housing standpoint? What they're going to do is they're going to buy the housing, the limiting inventory that's on the market, and further gentrify the communities and push middle-class Charlottesville and middle-class Albemarle County to the surrounding counties in Central Virginia. It will further increase values. Here's an example of what I'm talking about, a biopharmaceutical company, and this is news to celebrate. If you're investing $200 million right in the urban ring, over the city line on Avon Extended, and you're creating 200 new jobs, we should celebrate this. The governor was here today. Governor Youngkin was here to celebrate this $200 million injection. But a piece of collateral damage from this, one of the shrapnels of collateral damage, is 200 new people to the area. We'll see how many are hired within the community. All right, that's the Wednesday edition of the I Love CVille Show. Alex Whitten and Nick Bell were fantastic. Thank you to those coaches and gentlemen. Thomas Neal tomorrow. Ooh, baby. President of the Jefferson Council. Get ready and giddy up, ladies and gentlemen. And Friday is going to be a pretty fantastic program. Also tomorrow, it's a 3-day show for us. Today, y mañana with the Erpies at 10:15 a.m., the I Love CVille Show at 12:30, and Greer, Achenbach, and the Downtown Spotlight at 2:30. We're off next week on vacation, and then back the following week with regular scheduled programming. It's the water cooler of Charlottesville, folks. It's the I Love CVille Show, the water cooler of Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Central Virginia. So long, everybody.